Yeah. Okay. Hi, Pius. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Pastor Min asked me to talk a little bit about racial injustice, and I've asked you to join in the conversation. And I appreciate you being here today. This is a difficult conversation to have. It often makes people very uncomfortable. And I really appreciate you being here and sharing your thoughts. I'd like to talk about how we, as committed Christians and members of the Orono United Methodist Church, might address this difficult and timely topic. Thanks for being here, and I'm interested to hear what you would like to share with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and greetings to the church. So I totally agree that this is a very uncomfortable conversation to have, and the first reaction of people would be to mind their business in quote and not even get involved in this conversation. But again, that approach to me is quite contrary to what Christ calls us to be as Christians and as advocates for people who don't have a voice. And so the first approach to this, in my opinion, is to really identify and appreciate that this truly exists, so that we can also identify how, as Christians, we can step in, um, you know, to bring in measures that would, number one, stop this, and then again be the light that people have to see in terms of um, as role models, if I should say, to emulate our behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful first place to start. That we need to ask people what's going on in their lives. Ask them, have you experienced this? And say, it's there any instance that you've experienced in this community as a person of color, as have you experienced any injustice? Have you experienced episodes of racism? And would you like to talk about it?
Sure, definitely. There are so many experiences that people go through that would be interpreted and categorized in such a category, if I must put it.
Mhm.
And it is real, and in fact, it happens. And as Christians, Scripture even makes us understand that, in the end, Jesus is going to ask that when I was hungry, you gave me food to eat. Now, the question really is, how would you know one is hungry? It depends on the steps that you take to find out, if the person is hungry or not. And so that is the action, the call to action that we're being called to as Christians. And again, with what people go through, especially people of color, it may be interpreted in so many ways. But as Christians, if we're being honest and if we open our eyes, we would realize that racism actually is a spectrum, and depending on what end of the spectrum that you're in, you're exposed to different treatments. And so that is key. And I would want to believe that most of us as Christians do not engage in what this world has created as racism and met out unjust behavior towards people because of color, because I really do not think that that is what God intended from the beginning. And again, for all the disciples and all the apostles that Jesus worked with, we knew where they came from, but the Bible never even mentioned about skin color. And it tells me really that was not even the focus of what Christ and God actually wanted to lay as a foundation for us to you know talk about His message to the world. So it spans from different patterns. I mean, people are stopped and frisked on the streets, pulled over by the police. There's a whole host of things that people of color are exposed to. And again, we talk about several of the killings again that happened recently that we were all aware about. These are all situations that are happening here that I believe need to be addressed.
So what I hear you saying is that um, maybe that it's not enough for me to say, okay, I don't participate in these things, therefore it's not my problem. Um, that I need to say, okay, it, do you have any instances of this in your life, or is this a concern for you in your life? And if you tell me that it is, then I hear it and I say yes, okay, then it's true, it happens.
Definitely. I
Mhm,
think, affirming
mhm.
what we hear is key. And I can understand that, especially with the George Floyd killing, the Black Lives Matter, arose. And in my opinion, I think it was a little unfortunate when, people try to move the subject from Black lives to all lives. That does not really affirm what those people feel. And there's a little bit of difference with that treatment as well. And I believe as Christians, we must be as fair and as honest as God has called us to be. And personally as well, we experience a lot of things, and our reactions are quite different. My mindset towards these are different, and so most of these I actually turn a blind eye to. But one thing that sticks in my mind is when we had a concern, about our daughter in one of the daycares that she had attended. We had a feeling that she was being given a little different treatment from the rest of the kids, which doesn't necessarily prove racism, but it may easily fall in that category as well. And so, as Christians, I think part of it is not to say, well, I'm not racist, and so it is not my problem. It is the problem of everybody. And as people that Christ has commissioned us, I believe it is time that we stand up and then we speak up, especially for those who do not have a voice. And I would actually want to share this scripture from Proverbs 31, verse 8 to 9. And I read from the NIV. So it reads here that speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up, judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. This is scripture. And I believe this is the call to action that Christ calls us, to put forth. It is it is good not to be racist, but it doesn't end there. I believe if we, step out, if we seek, if we ask people what they're going through, if we experience, certain interactions that we actually judge as an unfair treatment, we wouldn't necessarily have to walk away quietly because we're not the recipient. But I believe, as the scripture is telling us, we have to stand up. We have to be the voice for those who the system is not really representing, but the system is actually trying to suppress. And I believe that, speaking forth and speaking the right things, we would be sending an array of hope for those who are marginalized. And then number two, we would also create, the right behavior actually for others to emulate as well.
Wow, that's true religion. Um, and that's I don't know if I could say anything more than that. That's where we go next. We ask, we affirm, and then we advocate. And that that is truly being the voice for the voiceless, is for our children and for our children's children, um, who are truly those who cannot advocate for themselves. And thank you so much, Pius, for always being the voice of wisdom in the in the room. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, God bless.
God bless you.